Oh, good evening, everyone. It's really good to see you. Gosh, if I don't see you for a week, it really feels like a long time. You probably don't feel the same, but I'm always excited to see you on a Wednesday. I hope you've had a good day. Carly just reminded us we are 6 weeks into our 8-week program. Don't know how you feel about that, but that's pretty exciting. Maybe nerve-wracking. Yeah. Well, tonight we've got a really cool session planned together with Chris Hanlon here, who I'll pass over to in a few minutes. And it's all about pitching. And invitation here is pitching is so much more than a 5-minute pitch at a pitch night. I'm so excited to see what elements you might draw from this and bring into different elements of your business and your life. So invitation there to come open-minded for today. I do just want to check a couple of operational logistical points with you. Just because we're at the pointy end of the program, we have a couple of weeks left. Just want to make sure everyone's feeling good and clear about what's coming. And then I'm going to hand over to Chris. So let's just do that first. Okay.
Yay!
Yay, indeed.
I think I've come up with a good name for my business.
Oh, awesome. Do you want to share quickly? That's exciting.
I was thinking of calling my business Sextant, named after that navigational tool that sailors used to have, because it's about helping young disabled people being able to navigate, advocating for their rights.
Awesome, Carly. That's so cool. And what good timing to have an idea of a name as well. Good stuff. Thank you. Awesome. So guys, just so that you all have the overview of the final dates left. So after tonight's session, we have a pitch practice with Emma and I on the Monday midday. There is a calendar invite for that. It's only an hour. I invite you to come if you can. I do recognize that it's at a time we usually don't meet, but if you can come, I really encourage you to. People who have pitched in the past and also made it to the pitch practice felt more confident and at ease, and they also had a chance to get more feedback from us. If that's not possible, you can always book in a 10-15-minute call with me just to run through your pitch. Yeah, so all you have options there too, but that's available to you. Next Wednesday night is our legal and financial foundations workshop with Tom. That's going to be a cracker, and that's your last capacity building workshop. After that, because legal is so unique to every business and you will have very different questions and requirements, we're having a Q&A for that. So Tom will join us again for an hour to answer your questions. So I'll follow up with an email about this, but again, if you can, do use that time with Tom. And wow, in 2 weeks, we have the grand finale, the pitch night. And what that looks like in terms of a time commitment is we will have a full run through. So this involves a full technical run through with you guys, everyone who's pitching, with Emma and me and with Chris, to just feel confident before the evening. And again, everyone who makes it to the run through feels good for the evening. And the pitch event itself, as you know, is in the evening from 6:30, probably to about 9 o'clock, because there are quite a lot of you, but we'll look at how we do that exactly. So keep an eye on the timings. I'll be putting emails through. Please come to as much as you can as we finish up. Chris is going to talk about content and style and give a lot of great tips today. I just want to give some guidelines from our side, more on the logistical side. Your pitch will not be able to be longer than 5 minutes. In fact, 3 to 4 minutes is probably even better, because there are quite a number of you. I know some of you have already indicated you don't want to pitch, and that's okay. Please do let me know by the end of this week what you want to do. In terms of slides, we'll come to this, but if you are pitching, 1 slide with your contact details on it, and if you have a logo, great, just as a support. Otherwise, maximum 5 slides. So 1 slide per minute. I've got a slide deck in the shared drive now. You'll see I've got the example of pitch night from cohort 2. So you can run through that and see what slides they had and the structure. And I've also got where you can plug in your own slides, but I'll follow up with an email. Last thing, and I'm going to hand it over to Chris. The invitation from Impact Hub's side is to be brave, be intentional with your messaging, and to have fun. Don't forget that this is an opportunity, guys, to celebrate being in this program, ideating maybe for the first time, and just celebrating each other and how far you've come. So this is equally about celebrating you guys as it is about pitching your business. So that's an invitation from us there too. If you have questions, you know, email me, send me a WhatsApp chat, email a message in the chat here, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Just wanted to cover the logistics before we actually get into the fun stuff. Okay, thank you so much. Without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Chris Hanlon. Chris, thank you so much for being here. Really excited for this session. Chris has coached previous TEDx speakers, so what a great person to bring into the room and support you guys today. Thank you so much, Chris. Over to you.
Cool. Okay, so everybody can hear me all right. That's always a good start. I'll get you guys to all click onto the view in the top corner and make sure it's on speaker view. And the reason for that is the slides will be shared behind me, so you want to be able to see that. All right, so let's kick into it. So this is what we're going to look at in this session. We're going to look at the strategy of what it is that you're hoping to accomplish in your pitch. We're going to look at my philosophy, which I think you'll find useful. You'll let me know if you don't. We'll go through the process of how to put this pitch of yours together, the way I find most effective to do, particularly a short pitch, which is what we're looking at here. And then I'll give you some tips on presenting. I'll talk a little bit about presenting on stage because eventually you'll be doing that. But obviously we'll look at Zoom specifically for presenting as well, because that's probably what this is going to be, right? So, one thing I was going to ask Ella, is there a Q&A portion of these guys' pitch? Do they pitch for 5 minutes and then have a 2-minute Q&A, or is that not part of it?
It's not part of it for the online pitching, also for time reasons, but we do have another way that people can ask questions and give feedback in breakout rooms.
I'm going to talk about Q&A, but it's not part of this pitch that you guys are doing, so just be aware of that, all right? But it's an important thing to cover, so I will cover it through this. I did mean to ask you about that before. And so, yeah, so that's what we're going to do. So introductions. This is the point normally where the presenter would say, this is me and this is what I'm all about. But what I'm going to do is sort of flip it a little bit today. And I'm going to see if I can introduce you. So if I'm right, you're in the Back to Purpose program because you've got an idea that you think is fantastic, but you've got maybe, or you had some trepidation about whether you're the person to make this thing happen. Or maybe even if the world is ready for your big idea. And so maybe there are also a few things that you didn't know about starting a business, and you thought that this Back to Purpose program can help you find how you can make this idea of yours a reality. And then why are you here today? Why are you listening to me with this presentation today? Maybe for some of you, it'll simply be because you've got a presentation in 2 weeks and you want to get what you need to get it done, right? Hopefully there's a few of you also, or most of you, realize that a good idea is nothing until it's shared. Until you share your good idea with investors, customers, potential employees, partners, all those sorts of things, media, whether it's influencers, until you share that idea effectively and with some impact, it doesn't go anywhere. And that's why presenting is really important. And that's what we're going to cover today. So how did I do with that? Give me a thumbs up or whatever if that sort of speaks to where you're at. Yeah. Okay. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But what I'm going to do first is we're going to do a little bit of an exercise straight off the bat. And what I want you to do is we're going to jump into rooms in pairs in a second. And we're going to be in there for 2 minutes. And we'll let you know when there's 1 minute to go. It'll probably pop up with the 1 minute thing. What I want you to do is imagine you're meeting the other person. Now, I know you guys all know each other, but we're going to imagine you're meeting another person at a networking event for the very first time. And you're going to say, hi, my name's this. This is my business. This is what I do. 1 minute. And then the other person does it back. All right. Are we good with that? Any questions on that instruction? No? Ella, can we split everyone off to a...
Yep, we can do that. And how long do we have? 2
minutes. And if you can let them know at the 1 minute mark.
Yeah, we'll do. All right, zooming you off. Do you want to be in there or not? No? I can't hear you.
It mutes you when you jump through, I forget. There wasn't anybody in there with me.
No, I did that on purpose because I thought you'd want to stay here, but I should have checked that with you. Do you want to stay here? Oh,
no, I'll stay here. It popped up and I went, am I supposed to go there? Okay. Cool. Now, really, we just went through that so we could go through this. That was your primer. What we're going to do now is I'm going to use a little script that I've used with a lot of entrepreneurs and their businesses and different people, nonprofits and what have you. And I call it the Have You Ever script. So instead of saying, I'm an accountant, I look after people's small businesses' finances as something, with the Have You Ever script, we talk about the problem before we talk about the solution. So imagine we're in a networking event and you ask me, and I'm this accountant dude. I'm not, don't ask me anything about accounting, but imagine I'm an accounting dude. And I say, have you ever got home from working on your business only to realize that you need to do the end of month financials? And then you've got to lock yourself away in the room, away from the family. You get into the computer, you're finding all the right things. You're trying to work out where it all is, plugging it into the right spreadsheets or the right forms. It always takes 3 times longer than you want. Now, maybe this hasn't happened to you, but it probably has happened to somebody you know. Well, that's what I do. I help people with that problem, right? Can you feel how that's a very different way to approach something, particularly in a networking situation? If you start with the have you ever, and it doesn't have to be have you ever, but that's quite a good, easy way to start it. Have you ever had this problem that you solve? And go a little deeper with that problem. Let them know how they feel with that. Talk about how they feel. Talk about what it is that they feel in a granular way. So your head throbs as you're working with spreadsheets, because every time I work with spreadsheets, my head throbs, or whatever. It gives that message across there. I'll give you another example just to give you an idea. One of the people I gave this advice to, or we had this conversation, the script that she used, she changed it to do you remember? And the reason she had do you remember is it's something that everybody does. Most things is have you ever, because not everybody has. So if you've never been a parent, you can't say, do you remember when your kid was, well, I didn't have a kid. But if you say, have you ever had to change a nappy or whatever, then people will either go, oh yeah, I have, or no, but I know people who have, right? So this other example I've got here is, do you remember that last year of school when you felt really comfortable in the school world, because that's your whole life up to this point. But next year, you're going out into the wide world, and it's scary. Sometimes it's terrifying. You freeze and you don't know what it is you're going to do next year. Your whole world's going to change. Well, I work as a school careers counsellor, and I'm here tonight to find fascinating people who'd like to share their career story or what they do now with students that I work with. And that was what she was doing, because she was networking and she was saying, I'm a school careers counsellor, and it just wasn't connecting. So we changed it to that sort of script, and it got people's attention, and it got them because people need to feel before they can think. You need to get people to feel before they think. And so if you can get them to feel, they go, oh, I know what you're talking about. And then they can engage with you. All right. So what I want you to do now is we're going to go back into the breakout rooms. We're going to have double the time. You'll probably be with somebody different this time. But this time you're going to use the have you ever and talk about the problem. And then I solve that by doing X, right? We all good? So we're going to have 2 minutes each to do a have you ever. So 2 minutes, one first person, and then we'll flip over 2 minutes, and then we'll come back. All good with that? Makes sense? Yep. Ella, take it away.
Off you go. Right, everyone's back.
I'm back. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so I want to get some feedback from you guys. So just jump in. I want to know, what was the difference between the first and the second? What did you like? What didn't you like?
I thought that, oh, sorry, it's
Yep.
Carly here. I thought the first one was, I thought, really kind of pasty and everyone is doing it. But the second one allowed me to put my unique spin on things.
Absolutely. So at the end of a networking event, if you're meeting a lot of people, because you go to these things to meet a lot of people, you want particularly your target audience to remember you, right? And so if you've been talking about a problem that they have and they can relate to, they're going to remember you. But if you just say, I'm, for argument's sake, an accountant, and they don't click that that's the issue that they have. I have problem with numbers. I don't have problems with accountants. You know what I mean? That'll stick in their mind. Who else has got something to add to that?
Oh, it was great. It was really easy to relate to. Like you could, and also for me, so much easier to like communicate what I'm offering as well.
Yeah, the better you paint that picture of the problem, the more you're going to engage. And it's so different from what anyone else is doing that it will absolutely be memorable, like I say. Anybody else got any comments? No, that's cool. Oh, sorry.
Okay. I found the second time around my enthusiasm carried me. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So what we want to think about, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, is when you're talking about the problem first, you're engaging your audience. So in this, we're talking about a networking situation, an audience of one usually. You're talking to one person, right? But it's equally useful if you're in a group meeting where everybody gets up one by one and introduces themselves. This is a great way to do that. And then obviously, as we go into presentation, the same philosophy, if you like, applies. Talk about the problem first so they know where you're coming from. Okay, let's move on. So that's have you ever. The next thing, and that was really just to set the scene, if you like. The next thing I want to talk about is really the first thing you need to be doing, and that's your strategy. Why are you giving this presentation? What is it that you want out of it? Now, I'm not accepting an answer of, I'm in this program and we have to give a presentation. That's not the answer, right? The answer is, what is it that it's going to do for your business, for you, by doing the presentation, whatever presentation it is. And we're not just talking about this one you guys have got come up, because you will be doing other presentations as your business goes forward. So why are you doing this presentation? What is it that you want to accomplish? It could be that you're after investment, right? It could be you're after clients, you're after customers. It could be simply that you want to build your email list with people that might be interested. It could be to get access. And what do I mean by that? Maybe you have to give a presentation to, say, a council or something to be accepted as a provider for the council going forward, or any industry, you know, it could be whatever. So it might be an access issue. It could be to find other people to do joint ventures with, or it might even be just getting into the press, getting a good news story or whatever, article written about you or something like that. Doesn't matter what it is that you want, but you need to pick something, and you really need to pick one major outcome that you're after. You can't say, oh, I want all those things, because let me tell you, in a 5-minute pitch, you're absolutely not going to get all those things. You're not going to cover them all, right? But you should always have one, and maybe one, possibly two backups, depending on how long your pitch time is. So you might say, I'm absolutely after investment, but if I don't get the investment, my secondary thing is I want to get a new chief financial officer. And so somebody in this audience might be somebody for that. And so you might have a quick line in there about, we're looking for a chief financial officer, right? But that's not going to, your secondary outcome can't impact your first outcome. Your primary outcome is your primary outcome. And whatever else you put in there might be a line, but it's no more than that. And it doesn't take away from your primary outcome. Does that make sense? Yep, cool. All right, so strategy is a big thing. Now, the questions we asked beforehand was around the strategy thing. And that's important because you've got to be thinking about strategy. And one of the questions I asked, you know, that Ella sent out to you was, if you could only let your target audience know about one thing in your business or product, what would that be? Now, hopefully that made you think, and it wasn't a quick throw it out there sort of thing, because whatever that thing that you put down is probably a significant focus for this presentation you're going to give, right? Because everything's about prioritization, particularly when you're getting down to like a 5-minute talk, because what you leave out is as important as what you put in, right? So you need to be very mindful of what it is you're trying to achieve in order to get the right things in there. And the other thing, the question we said is, of all the things that your presentation could do to help your business, what would move the needle most? And again, that comes to the outcomes we just talked about. Maybe getting investment, maybe getting the right mentor, right? So you're doing a pitch, you're not so fussed about investment, but you need somebody that knows that industry to come on board, either as a mentor or even as a partner, if that's where you're at, right? So you really need to think about these things. Anybody got anything that they identified as either the one thing they want to know, one thing they would want people to know about their business, or what would move the needle the most? Anybody?
I've got a very new concept. It's only just kicking off in Europe, so that I want to let people know that the concept exists. It's the first thing really to know you exist and understand.
Yeah. So the thing you need to get across is that is this new concept, the whole new idea. That's cool. Anybody else got anything they've identified? All right. Okay, that's fine. We will move on. So whenever you give a presentation, you always decide on your primary objective and maybe a secondary. You don't have to have a secondary, maybe a secondary objective, right? And that will change from time to time. So at one point, you might be giving pitches all the time for investment, and then you get some investment. Well, you're still going to be pitching. Trust me, you're still going to be pitching something all the time to someone for some reason. And so the next time it might not be investment, next time might be for clients, right? So you might be doing talks in the right environment to get clients. or whatever. But every time you need to be thinking about, what is my strategy? What am I doing here? Okay, moving on. This is one of the things I use as our strategic thing. This is what we use actually with TEDx for their talks, but I've used it for everything. I call it the audience promise, and it's not something I give to, it's not something we tell the audience. This is for me. This is for me to figure out what I'm going to say, how I'm going to craft my pitch or my talk or whatever. And it's these three questions, very simple. How do you want the audience to feel? At the end of your pitch, you've given, in this case, your 5-minute pitch, you've given it, you're going back off, they're going on to the next speaker or whatever. How do you want the audience to feel at that moment? Do you want them to feel excited? Do you want them to feel inspired? What is it that you want them to feel? It might be relieved that finally somebody's got a solution. How do you want them to feel? The second thing is, what do you want them to know that they didn't know before? So Hanlon said, this is a new concept. I want them to know this concept exists, right? So that's perfect. What do you want them to know? And then finally, what do you want them to do as a result of your pitch? And this goes back to what we were talking about before, the strategy, the outcome. I want them to invest, or I want them to X, Y, Z, whatever it is, right? So write these things out when you're starting to put your pitch together. And that's just to keep you on track, because as you're writing down what you're going to say, or you're creating slides or whatever, you can come back to this and go, is it moving them towards how I want them to feel? Is it moving them towards what I want them to know? And is it moving them towards what I want them to do? Because if it isn't, you might just cut it out, right? Cool. So it's just a tool for you to use. All right, that's the strategy pretty much. What I want to talk about really briefly now is my philosophy on how we deal with short talks and presentations. This is the same philosophy I share with the TEDx people. So I've helped coach TEDx Ruakura speakers for 7 years now, coached over 50 TEDx Ruakura speakers, and I've coached other TEDx speakers for different TEDx's, and do private coaching for paid professional speakers and business owners that they have to do some speaking, right? So if you're going to give a short talk, you are not going to teach them everything that you know about your subject, right? You, as an entrepreneur, have gone deep into a problem and found a solution. You know more than most people know about that. And what happens in my experience with people that are in your shoes at this sort of point in time, they have one of two reactions. Either they go, I don't know what to say, because there's so much and I don't know what to say first, and they sort of freeze, or they go the other way and have verbal diarrhea and just go blah, 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 and don't join all the dots, and the person's going, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So you've got to be careful with that. So what the philosophy is this short talk will never give the other person the information that you have. What it is, it's there to start a conversation with your audience. And this is particularly true of these presentations. If you are looking for investment with a 5-minute pitch, it's never going to happen that somebody goes, cool, here's a check for $100,000, see you later. That's never going to happen. It's the start of a conversation. They go, I really like that pitch. I want to find out more. I want to know more about your business. I want to know more about what you do. It's the beginning of a conversation or a relationship, right? So remember that. So with the starting a conversation, and we're going to talk about this in a second, we go through the problem. So they know what the problem is. You give them the idea, like Helen said, of the concept of your solution, right? The solution that's there. You're going through all these things to get them interested to take the next step. Yeah. It's not about giving them all the information so they know as much as you know, done, job done. That's never going to happen. It's about starting that conversation. And maybe there's some things you withhold that you don't tell them because it keeps them curious and they want to find out. You can tease them a little bit, right? With some information. But but we'll move on from there. That's basically my philosophy on that, and I'll get some questions about that later on, I'm sure. Okay, so with any talk or presentation, what you want to, you've got an outcome, right? You've already decided that you are going to this end point. But any journey has to have a start point and an end point. If it doesn't have a start point and end point, it's not a journey. You're not going anywhere, right? So we need a start point and end point. So the audience start point is something that you want to write out. And we're going to do a little bit of an exercise about this in a second. So keep this in mind. So the audience start point is, what do they know about my thing right now? What are their preconceptions? What do they think this is all about? What are the misconceptions that other people give them? Who's in the market? What are the competitors? Why do they use those competitors? So they have an idea of what things are, right? You need to figure out where your start point is so that you can find the end point. The end point's a lot simpler. The end point is, at the end of this talk, I want this outcome, I want them to know this, and I want them to know that. We've already done that. So we can write out what the end point is. We want them to understand this. But if we don't know what their start point is, then it's really hard to lead them from the start to the end, right? So we really need to focus on this start point. So we're going to do that now. We're going to break you up again into pairs. We're going to have 6 minutes, so 3 minutes each on this. Now, it's not just one person talking, because I want you to help your partner. So your partner is going to say, one of you is going to start and say, right, this is my business. Now, I guess most of you guys know what your businesses are. I think my audience thinks this, you know. I think if my audience has a headache, that the only solution is disparate. I don't know, whatever that you think the misconception is. And then if your partner can think of, oh yeah, I thought that was the thing as well, they can give you other ideas, right? A good, we'll do this exercise first, and I'll give you some other tips afterwards. So what we'll do is split into our rooms of 2. One person go first for 3 minutes, then we'll split up, swap over. But each of you come up, help the person with their business on all those start points, their preconceived ideas. Yep. Cool. Ella.
All right. Any questions, team? Are we good?
Hey, Ella.
Yes, Morag.
So the audience, can we determine the audience? So obviously, if it's investors, they would be completely different from customers. So we determine the audience.
Yeah, for this exercise. So if you say, right, I'm after investors, these are their preconceptions. Yeah,
cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Morag, generally you can invite people that you want to pitch to, and we also bring community members to the pitch night. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so how did you guys find that? Did anyone have some feedback from their partner that said, I always thought this, that you didn't expect? Did you learn anything from your partner? Nobody?
Yep, I did. So Jimmy gave me some good feedback with regards to an assumption, because I was like, I was pitching to an investor, and and he added to what could be an assumption that I felt I had missed out on, because I'm looking at a childcare business, and Jimmy gave his feedback being a migrant coming into New Zealand on a work visa, how they could not access work and income to be able to afford childcare for their children. So yeah, so that was good. That was good feedback. Thanks, Jimmy.
Good stuff. So whenever you've got an ongoing product, so I'm assuming that most of you don't have an ongoing product right now. Often what you'll have built over time is an FAQ page on your website, right? Frequently asked questions. those are the sort of things that you're going to mine for your audience start point, right? Because the questions they have indicate what their thinking is beforehand. So they might say, will this product only work for X age group? I don't know, whatever, right? And so if you know that's a question that comes up a lot, then you need to include that in some way in your presentation, right? Or you may need to, depending on how important it is to your outcomes. So that's a good way to think about that. So we've got our audience start point. You're going to do a little bit more work on that, I recommend. Figure out all those things that the investors or the clients or whatever it is, investors you're going for, what they think of the space, what they think it already is, what they think's difficult, what they don't understand about it. Write all those things down. And those are the obstacles, if you like, or gates that get between you and your endpoint. And your endpoint is they want to know this, I want them to feel like this, and I want them to give me money, or whatever it is that your endpoint is, right? Okay, so I hope that makes sense. We're going pretty quickly through this, but we've got quite a bit to go through. So has anybody got any questions on this audience journey part?
Yes, Chris. So yes, I'm kind of like trying to understand. So the end point is the outcome that I want.
Yes.
Right? Hopefully the positive outcome that I get, because now that I'm trying to understand what they're thinking, potentially
Yes.
negative, the misconceptions, as you said, now my end point is assuring them that this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Cheryl. So before, when I was talking about the audience promise, that was really about you, and that was helping you to create things. This audience journey is, we're not thinking about us anymore as the presenter, we're thinking about our audience. And so we're thinking about where they are before we start talking, what they're thinking, what they understand, what they know, what they don't know. And then at the end of our talk, this is what we want them to know. We want them to know this. We want them to understand this. We want them to, so to get from here to there, there's going to be some objections. They're going to be going, well, I thought this, or my grandma told me that this is the only way to do the washing. You know, you can't use those newfangled things, anything like that, whatever it is, assuming it's relevant to the outcomes that you want to get in this presentation. Whatever it is, you list those objections, and then you make sure you're going to cover them throughout your presentation. Yeah, cool. Does that answer your question, Cheryl? Yeah, cool. All right, let's move on a bit. Okay, so I've got 5 things we're going to go through here. This is my process that I'm going to recommend. So the first thing I'm going to say is, don't start with you. Now, at the beginning of this presentation, I didn't introduce myself. I didn't say, this is me, this is what I've done, these are all the people I've worked with, etc., etc. Why didn't I do that? Anyone? I didn't do that because nobody cares. Nobody cares until we get to how I can help you, right? So what I did do was talk about probably what your problem is, and then I said I can help with that, right? So I want you not to start with you. I want you to start with the problem. This is going back to that have you ever script. With that, we're engaging people because we're identifying the problem, right? So you don't start with you, start with the problem. So start with the problem and who you're going to help, who it is you're going to help. That I don't think we need to go into too much more detail, because we've sort of pretty much covered that. Just work on, you can absolutely start with a have you ever. You could say, have you ever, da 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 da. That's the problem I'm solving, and for these people, right? You could absolutely start your presentation with that sort of thing, okay? Or you can change it a little bit around there. Okay, next one. The second part, so once you've done the problem, the next thing is the solution. So it's problem, solution. So how are you going to help them? What are you going to do? And this is where you're going to go into a little bit more detail about what makes your solution more effective, affordable, better for the planet, whatever it is your angle is, right? Because there's something that differentiates your solution from the solutions that are already out there. So we need to express that. We need to put that across. That also may include how do you fit into the competitive landscape, particularly if you're seeking investment. That's going to be a big thing for them. They're going to want to know market size, but that's the next slide really. But they're going to know how you fit in where everybody else is and what your marketplace advantage is. So if you have a greener way to do something that's currently being done, and it might not be cheaper for the consumer to use, but you can say, this is better for the planet. The trend is moving that way. People care. We need to move that way. In the future, there might be government subsidies or whatever to enforce people to move that way. That's where we're at. Yeah. So we started with the problem. This is the solution. And then we move into this business side of things. Okay. The business is, you know, how's this business going to operate? Excuse me. What's your business model? How are you going to make money? Is it online? Is it offline? How does it work? And this is then when you're going to talk about what you're looking for in terms of investors. If you're after investment, this is where you would talk about that. And it's important that if you're asking for money, they're going to want to know why. What are you going to use the money for? It's my money. If I'm going to give you my money, what are you going to do with it, right? So you need to outline that. You need to say, we need money to do the marketing thing, or we need money to get the capital equipment to build this widget, whatever it is. I don't know what it is for your case, but this is where you put that in. So how's your business going to operate? What's your business model, which is how you're going to make money? And that also explains what your costs are, right? Because your business model is going to cover your costs as well. It's going to say, so we're online, so we don't have huge, it's drop ship, so we don't have inventory costs, right? You'll say that sort of thing if it's applicable. And then what we are looking for is investment of $200,000 to kick off our marketing campaign for our early adopters, XYZ, excuse me. Okay, so I'll take questions on all 5 of these steps in a bit, right? We'll go through the other 2 first. So you've done problem, solution, business. Now we can talk about you, right? Now you're going to talk about who you are, because it's really important that they talk about you, because they're not really investing in the business in most cases. In most cases, they're investing in you. Your business is just the reason that they're going to use to invest in you. All right. So this is critical point. This is probably the point more people struggle with than any other part of it, but you absolutely need to talk about you. And when I say talk about you, you don't need to say, I was born in Wellington and I grew up and I went to this primary. You don't need all that stuff. What they really want to know is, why are you passionate about doing this? Why is this a thing for you? What are your goals? Where are you going? What do you want this to become? Because if I'm going to invest in a business that you're creating, and your goal is to make $200,000 a year through your business, well, there's not much there for me, for my investment to bring back. But if you say, I want to make this a $2 billion business, okay, now we're talking. Now I want to find out if you're really committed to doing that and how you want to do that. And if you've got the chops to get that done or whatever, right? So when you're talking about you, it's what's your story? Why are you passionate? What is it that why do you think this is such an important idea, right? Because that speaks to your passion. What you've done in the past that gives you some credibility or skill set. So I was a financial officer in this company, so I'm good with the numbers, right? And don't be afraid to say, I haven't got an engineer yet, and I really need that. If that's the case, don't be afraid to say that in your presentation. We're looking for an engineer, because that self-awareness of we're creating a team, but we're missing this piece is as important as saying what you are good at, because the right person will go, I know somebody who would fit with you, and they'll find you that engineer, right? So that's an important point. When you're talking about you, it's why should investors or clients trust you? So anything you've done in the past that's relevant could be useful, that's relevant to your business, that is. I've written down at the bottom of the slide, and we'll give you copies of these slides anyway. Whenever we're doing a TEDx, so I do TEDx talks, I'm one of the curators, right? I head the curation team. So we find 150 people usually in a year that want to speak, and we have 10 spots, usually 10 to 12, depending on what we end up with. And we narrow it down to about 50, I think we usually narrow it down to, and we email them out and we say, I want a 2-minute video, and I want you to tell us why this idea is important to you, why now is an important time to share it, and why you're the person to share it, right? This is for those TEDx talks.
And trust me, it's very difficult to put what you're really passionate in a 2-minute video.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we do that, because if they can't do that, then we get people sending us a 6-minute video, and it's like, yeah, you're not in. Anyway, but the point is, this is the same sort of mindset for your pitch, right? Why is this idea important? Why is now the time to do it? And why are you the person to be doing this business, right? If you can nail those 3 questions in this part of your presentation, it'll go a long way to that presentation being effective. Yeah. Okay. So we'll go through the 5th part, and then we'll take questions on any of those parts. So the 5th part is the ask. Every presentation has to have an ask. If you are not asking for something at the end of your presentation, you've just wasted everyone's time. Your time, their time, the organizer's time, everybody's time. There's got to be an ask. Now, the ask will depend on your outcome. Like I said before, your ask could be, in future presentations, could be as simple as, I want you to go to this website, download this free thing, and join our mailing list, right? Because you want to build your mailing list. That might be the ask. At the very least, it's connect with me on social media, right? That's the limpest, lamest ask, but at least it's an ask, all right? Or, we're looking for $200,000 to kickstart our marketing budget, blah, 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 whatever it is that you're after. So there's always an ask. So it can be as simple, I've written something down here. If you like what you've heard so far and want to explore investment opportunities with us, I'd love to continue the conversation. So email me or meet me back in the room, or whatever your call to action is, right? Remember what I said about philosophy. This presentation is the start of a conversation. It's the start of a relationship, because when you are getting an investment in your business, it is a relationship. It's a marriage contract, right? And so you need to start this relationship. And the first thing is that tease at the beginning that gets people interested. And then we're going to take that to the next step, and we'll go through due diligence and bits and pieces like that. All right. One thing, it's really hard for me to give specific advice on how detailed your ask should be, because every presentation will be different. Each of your businesses are different. There are different stages. You have different outcomes that you want. So some of you might have a sort of wider ask. So we're looking for people interested in investing with us, or We're looking for people to help us with mentoring or on the board or whatever, board of advisors. That might be quite broad, or it might be really focused. We have an opportunity in the next 90 days to meet this market opportunity. And to do that, we need $150,000 seed money to do that. So we're after that. And we want that to come from 2 different individuals, because we don't have just one, we want 2 different individuals. So I'm after 2 people that have $75,000 each. No, so it could be as detailed as that, or it could be as broad. And it's really hard for me to give you any feedback on that. And that'll be something that Ella and Emma or whoever will probably give you more feedback on as you do your pitches. Okay, so those are the 5 steps, the breakdown that we just went through. We have, you want to talk about your problem, you want to talk about your solution, you want to give the rounding of the business. This is what the business shape is, the model, how we make money. Now, if that sounds really difficult, like that's a lot to put in 5 minutes, and it is, remember to use shortcuts, and a lot of shortcuts, and you hear it all the time, and people do poo-poo it a bit. This is the Netflix of whatever. This is the, the Uber of, changing nappies. I don't know. Whatever it is, the reason you say that is, the reason these people say that is it just shortens that explanation curve. You don't have to explain what Netflix is because everybody knows it. So you can say it's the business model is like Netflix, but we're dealing with this. And it, in a few sentences, you've got the basic idea of that business model. Okay. Now, a lot of people say, so sick of hearing about the next Uber of this or the Netflix of that. But if you've only got 5 minutes, you've only got 5 minutes. So it doesn't hurt to use those sorts of shortcuts. All right. Anybody got any questions on any parts of the breakdown for this?
I do, Chris.
Yes.
One thing that we have spoken a lot about in this program is the difference that you're wanting to make on either people or the planet. What's your impact, or what's your intended impact? Where here would you say would that slot in best?
There's 2 parts for that. So that part of that will come into the solution, right? So you want to weave it through the whole thing. So if you have a physical solution, like, so that what's that? Will enable, right? Will enable washing care detergents or whatever. They help handicapped people get a job, as I understand it, right? Or disabled people getting a job. So you can talk about the detergent, but that's not really the problem. Really, the problem that they're solving is these people that can work, but aren't given the opportunity to work. So when you're doing your problem, you bring both in. You say, we've got all these things, these people that need work and that aren't being able to express themselves or work or earn an income or whatever it is, right? And the solution is to give them work, and we're going to give them work by doing this detergent thing, and we've got the market base for this detergent thing, right? And then the biggest part of this will be coming down to why, the number 4, the why you're doing this. And that'll be because I have a family member who has this problem, and I realized it was endemic and everybody had the problem. And these are great people and they deserve a shot, and I'm here to give them that shot, right? So you're bringing that wider impact into as many of these stages as possible. You probably won't talk about it in the business side of it. You might, but depending on the business model, if that makes a difference. And you might mention it in the ask, but the point is the ask should be a pretty clear ask. Everything else builds up to that ask. So your ask should be pretty short. Generally, the ask is going to be 15 to 30 seconds, to be honest. So you can get that impact thing in your problem, in your solution, and in the you is the big places. Any other questions? Now, one thing I will say is it's tempting to go, oh, there's 5 minutes, there's 5 parts, there's 5 slides. We'll do a minute on each. No, don't limit yourself to that. I mean, that could be helpful to start it off with, but you really, it'll be different for everybody, and it'll be, you know, it'll change around. Your ask should be really short, because if you haven't done the work before the ask to get that ask across the line, then that's not your problem. Did you have a question, Nikki?
Sorry, I didn't mean that to flick on me. Yeah. Is there how do you typically start like brainstorming this pitch? Like, do you start by thinking about your ask, or do you, like, when you start writing it out, kind of drafting it?
So you go through your strategy, so you know what your outcome is, right? I'm doing this presentation because I want $200,000 to do this or whatever. So you've got your strategy, right? Then I do my audience promise so that I know where I'm aiming at this pitch taking them. I want them, by the end of this, I want them to be so excited they want to give me $200,000 basically, right? So that's my driving force for me to think about. Then I do the audience journey. I'm talking about medical things. Okay, the audience that I've got coming are investors. If they're all medical investors, then they probably won't have too many preconceptions. Windows virus protection, no, go away. They don't have a lot of preconceptions, right? Whereas, oh, it's not a medical bunch of medical investors, so I'm going to have to give them a little more context around what it is I do, right? So that audience start point becomes really important. You need to know sort of who's in that room. And when you're talking about audience, there's 2 audiences really. There's who's in the room and who's your target audience in that room. So if you're after investment and you're a medical company, then you might have 30 people in the audience, 10 of them are investors, but only 3 of them are medical investors. Those are your target audience, and you want to talk to those mostly. You want to cover the others a little bit. You don't want them to feel left out, but particularly in a 5-minute presentation, you're going to focus right in on those target audience. So Ella and Emma are going to help you with who's going to be in the room, who you're going to be targeting, right? I assume you've already done your customer avatars or your investor avatars or whatever, who it is that you're probably going to be aiming for. Does that, so once you've done your audience start point, then you go, right, we've got audience endpoint, I want them to get to this point, and then you look at these 5 things. Right, how am I going to best describe the problem so people feel it? Like I said before, you want them to feel it so they can think it. How do I really engage them? And that's why we did that have you ever script, to give you a sense of how that can be done. Paint the picture as best you can. Then talk about your solution and why it's different, right? Why it's different from what's already out there. It's just not, oh, it's exactly the same as that, but it's me instead of them. That's not going to work. It's got to be something different, right? What's your solution? How are you going to roll this business up? Because sometimes that's the solution. It might be, well, it's really doing the same thing as what these other guys, but they sell it and we have a subscription model, and that's our differentiation. I don't know. But, you know, go through your business, because that's going to be important. If they're going to invest, they want to know what they're investing in. And then again, like I said, the you part, why are you passionate? Why should they invest in you? That sort of thing. And then finish it off with the ask. Does that answer your question, Nikki?
Yeah, that's good. That's really great, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. All right. Okay, how are we going for time? Good. Okay, we're good. All right, so I said we're going to mention this. Now, this is not applicable to your presentation for the Back to Purpose program, right? But it's very important for other pitches that you'll do later on. So I just want to give you a few tips. because a lot of some of the pitches I've done for other incubators, they've gone, you've got 3 minutes and then you've got 2 minutes of questions, right? And if you're doing something for that sort of format, sometimes what we do is seeding questions. I've got it written down there. And what that is it takes so long to explain this. I'm going to bore people if I explain it. What I'm going to do is say, we do X, Y, Z. I can tell you a little bit more about that, or answer any questions you got on that in the questions, and park it for the questions, right? Because it doesn't take up your presentation time. This isn't relevant for this, just so you know, but it's worth knowing and thinking about. Seeding questions can also be very strategic. And I don't want to go too deep here, but if you want to say, I'm the best in the world because I do this, but it sounds braggy if you do that, you can say, well, there is a reason we do that, but I don't want to go into it unless you've got some questions in the questions. And then when they ask that question, you have full authority to talk about how good you are. Whereas if you said it in the presentation, it comes across funny, right? So that's seeding questions. But the big thing I want to say is, when you're doing Q&A, when Q&A is part of what you're doing in terms of presentation, and a lot of investment pitches are like that, they'll have a panel that'll ask you a bunch of questions. You really need to practice your questions and answers as much as you do your presentation. It's like equally as important. Too many people do their presentations, they've got it so slick, and then they leave the Q&A to the last minute, and half an hour beforehand, they go through some questions. And that's where you get tripped up. And if you're doing that in front of a room of 100 people, it can be really painful. So really spend your time going through those Q&As, all the different ideas that you can possibly think of. If you're doing that sort of Q&A, jump online, go onto YouTube and look at presentations, pitching, investment pitches. There's loads of them there. And you hear some of the same questions coming up again and again from investors. And you just go, oh yeah, how would I answer that? Oh yeah, and get some ideas of how you'd answer that. Now, one thing I do recommend, this is just me though, so I don't know if Ella and Emma would agree, but when I'm talking about speaking, if you're doing a talk rather than a pitch, I tell people never to end on Q&A. And the reason for that is if you give a great talk and you come up to a crescendo of an ending and you go, yes, nailed it. And then you go Q&A, the first couple of questions are a bit not great because people haven't had time to think of them. Then you get some really good questions, really meaty questions, great questions. And then they sort of taper off to, so what did you have for breakfast this morning? And you end up walking off stage on a whimper. So you never end your presentation with Q&A. You always end with your own ending. So the way I do this with speakers is we go through like a sub close, like a short close, then we ask for some questions, and then we do our big close, which might be a minute or two, that summarizes the whole talk, and they go off with a round of applause, right? Similar sort of thing if you can in pitching. You want to have a brief statement, and it's because of the nature of these timings, it might only be 30 seconds, hopefully a minute, but a 30-second statement that summarizes everything beforehand, because you don't want the last thing that they remember being the worst question that you were asked, right? So whenever you can, even if they don't expect that, okay, last question, answer their question, and then do your quick statement before you leave. Really important, I think. Again, Q&A is not a big thing for your presentation this time, but it's a hugely important thing. Okay, next, PowerPoint slides. All right, we already said, Ella mentioned at the top of this call, if you're going to do a 5-minute presentation, you shouldn't have more than 5 slides, right? When I'm doing TEDx, I try to minimize the number of slides. If you're doing talks, the power of a slide is to add emotion where there isn't any. And that can be just a picture, the right picture. Picture says 1,000 words, right? It's about the emotion. Sometimes you need slides or even video to illustrate a concept or idea that you just cannot verbalize, right? You have to see it to understand it. And so absolutely use a slide for that. When we're doing the TEDx talks, what I get people to do is put blank slides. So it's a black slide in between the slides. And so what happens is you show a slide and then you click and it comes, everybody looks from the slides down to the person because you're the one on stage. We want the focus on you. So you want to control that. There's a bit of difficulty with that in Zoom, and I'm going to talk about Zoom next, so I won't go into that detail right now, but slides tend to distract. Now, obviously, the setup I've got here, if I want to take the attention away from the slide, I can just move in front of it because I've set it up that way, but probably you're not going to do that. So, you know, think about what you're going to use in terms of slides, and we'll go through how we're going to do that on Zoom because it's quite different, obviously. The other thing is branding and contact details. Ella mentioned at the beginning that you absolutely have to have that slide, and that's right. If you had a backdrop like I do, it would be worth putting your brand. So obviously I've got my branding up here, and you know, I've got nothing to sell, so I've got no website there or anything like that. But it would be good if you have some branding behind you, even if that's a poster on your wall, right? When you're doing your presentation. But if you're if you're doing a presentation live on a stage and using slides, definitely want that branding and how they can get in touch with you and things like that there. Okay. Any questions on slides just before I move on? Feel like I've forgotten something.
So what you're saying, Chris, especially for the night, like I've got a virtual background. Improving my virtual background on top of my slides would help, obviously, you know, get that idea across, apart from having that, you know, contact details as part of my slide. And that's part of the 5 slides, isn't it, Ella? That's the maximum, including that one slide of your contact details. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
because all you want to do is you don't want to distract everybody with my background.
Yeah. So if you're using a virtual background, I would suggest you create a background like this that I've got here, which may not have not so much information. It's just got your logo and your website address in there. That's what I often use for most of my meetings, because if I'm going to use a backdrop, I may as well use one that benefits me, right? Why would I have, although, you know, the desk with the plant looks great, it's not doing you any good, right? So it's better to have something like this. Okay, but that's really about Zoom, and we'll talk about that next. Oh no, we'll talk about presenting. Okay, presenting is, what I mean by this is the actual confidence part of it. This is the thing I get the most questions about. You know, how do I remember things? How do I stop being nervous? Okay, the bad news is you'll never stop being nervous. You just deal with it. You're always going to be nervous. I'm nervous. Everybody gets nervous, so don't worry about that. There are 2 keys. The first is preparation. Preparation trumps anything. The more prepared you are, the better it's going to be. The easier it's going to flow, the more confident you're going to feel, right? If you think I can wing it, you'll feel great up to about half an hour beforehand. And you may even feel great when you start talking. You may not feel great when you leave. And depending on your level of ego, and I can say that because I've got quite a big ego and feel quite comfortable in all sorts of situations. When you get feedback, you go, or you watch the video of what you just did, you go, oh, damn, I could have done better. I needed to be more prepared, right? So preparation trumps everything. If you find you're feeling starting to freeze up a little bit, seize up, and you're like, oh, it's usually because you're thinking about you and how you're doing. I'm thinking, oh my God, are they listening? Am I saying the right words? Oh, what am I going to say next? If I'm thinking about me, I'm going to screw it up. What I need to be doing is thinking about the audience and the message. So if I can, and it's a lot easier, I'll be honest, to do that live. You can pick 1 or 2 people in the room and you look at them and go, I want to get this message across. I want them to understand. And you focus on them and you focus on them understanding. As soon as that focus is off you and onto your audience, you're away. The nerves just disappear because you're focusing on something else. So whenever you find yourself starting to seize up, freeze up, whatever like that, start focusing on your audience rather than you, or because it's Zoom, it's a little bit more difficult, focus on the message rather than yourself. The message is, this business is such a good idea because, and just make sure, am I getting that message across, and think about the message, not about you. All right. Obviously, the next thing is practice with slides if you're going to use slides. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on I think the next slide when we're talking about Zoom, because if you're doing it live, you still want to practice with your slides. You want to know which slide order it is. You don't want to have to keep looking back and figuring out where you're at or anything like that, okay? And timing. You need to practice this a lot, right? So with talks, TEDx talks, they're all memorized. All the ones that we've got done through TEDx for the last 6 years anyway, have been memorized. So they've memorized pretty much word for word the whole talk. Now on the day, they might switch a few things around. Nobody would notice. I noticed because I practiced with them and they noticed. None of the audience noticed. But it gives them a huge level of confidence. And because, I don't know if you know this, but for TEDx, only the uploads of the videos have to be 18 minutes. So if you talk for 19 minutes and 30 seconds, the editor is going to edit that video down and they're going to cut 1:30 out. And you don't get any say into which 1:30 they get cut out, which might not be a great thing for you. So you want to make sure it's 18 minutes for the TEDx. For this, you've got a maximum of 5 minutes, right? So I would suggest you aim to get your talk down to 4 minutes, 40 seconds. Gives you a little bit of wiggle room, right? Chances are you always go a little bit over what you expect. Our TEDx people, I actually get them to aim for 15 minutes for their talk because we know we're going to cut it off at 18. If it's under 18, it's all great, but nobody cares, right? But if it's over, then there's a bit of a penalty to pay there. So the best way to do that, what do we do with the TEDx people, is they just record themselves talking and listen to the talk. Record themselves and listen to the talk. There's a whole process for that. That's the end of the process. But for a 5-minute thing, that's pretty much what I want you to do, is record yourself saying what you think you're going to say and then listen to it. Actually, as we go through Zoom, I'm going to give you an even better way to do it for this. So there's my tips for presenting on Zoom. How are we going? Almost done. We'll get through this in the next few minutes. So presenting on Zoom, the lighting's important, right? People need to be able to see you. Most of you are looking pretty good. So that's cool. I have a 3 lighting setup. I do this a lot. So, I mean, I've got a setup. Your sound's got to be good. So that helps. The background we've already talked about. Now, because I've got an actual green screen and I've got good lighting, my fingers don't disappear when I do this. You can tell it's a green screen, but there's nothing quite so bad as an ear disappearing when you move your head and half your headphones disappear and stuff like that. It looks annoying. So I try to avoid that unless you've got decent lighting and ideally a green screen. When you're talking, look at the camera. Don't look at your notes because it's really off-putting. And I've got a screen over there. So if I was looking at that screen while I was talking, that would really annoy you. I'm sure it annoys me. A tip for that is to grab the gallery or whatever and put it just under the camera. So if you're looking at people or even yourself, if that's what you prefer to look at, it's right below the camera. So you can be looking at yourself and it comes across really well. It's really important that you look at the camera. And that's not a simple thing to do. You need to practice that. So we're going to get to practice in a second. When you're going through things, because this is a 5-minute presentation, and you've got a lot to go through, the temptation is to talk nonstop for 5 minutes. You've got to build in pauses for the audience to catch up. If you're explaining a new concept, you've got to explain it and then give them a second to let that sink in. All right. So just build those pauses in there. You need to practice on how you're going to share slides and operate slides. I would consider changing your name, and I'm going to get you all to do this right now. Go into gallery view, find yourself, click on your right click, sorry, on your video. And at the bottom of that thing, it says rename, and it comes up with your name. Write in your website address. Okay. Just do that now, if you have a website. Because if you're presenting, it helps to have, why not have that call to action there? Why not have that there? Yeah. And that can be useful for all sorts of other Zoom things that you jump in on if you want people to go to your website. So try that. And finally, if you're doing slides and you're doing it on Zoom, remember that by default, all the gallery photos appear this side of the screen. So leave a gap there. Don't have the words go right across the screen, right? Practice it. So this is what I would do is I've got my slide deck set up. I'm going to share screen so I know how to do it properly. I get in there and I'll do the whole presentation in a Zoom room by myself. And what I might do is I'll get my phone and go into the same Zoom room. So there's two things in there because it gives an audience member. And when I share the screen, it'll put that little thing on, where is it? On this side down here of the other thing. So I can check that it's not going to cover the words I've got. Obviously these slides, and these slides that are behind me now, I've just done in PowerPoint. I've set them up so I can sit in the middle of it, right? So I'm not really covering everything there. Yeah. Well, when you're doing your Zoom presentation, you won't be standing in front of it probably. It'll be the whole screen, but don't forget there'll be that strip of other people down this one side. So leave a gap there so it doesn't interfere with people looking at slides. Yeah. All right. So finally, because I've got to do what I preach, there's my ask. Connect with me on LinkedIn because I've got nothing to sell or anything. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn by using the QR code there, or it's down on the bottom. Those slides will be on the thing. Anyway, finally, any questions? We're just a little over time, but any questions?
I don't really have a question, but I thought it was really interesting. It really was. So thank you.
You think it was helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Especially, I think the what you were saying at the beginning as well about asking the question, have you ever, or do you know, or things like that, and reframe it, because I think for me, I always sort of gabble on about how I've got a really rare skin disorder, and actually people don't really need to know that straight away. So yeah, so it's really good.
Cool, good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's kind of like making sense of a bird's nest of all your knowledge and all what you want to try and get out. And it's like, yeah, giving a process of making sense to be able to communicate that clearly to people.
Yeah, it really is about creating a structure for it. We were talking in the break, Ella and I, while you guys were in rooms, and a lot of people freak out because there's just so much they want to put into so little time. And if you can create the right structure and you know what it is you want to get across, and you realize you're not going to tell them everything, you're only going to get their interest to go to the next step, then it takes a lot of that pressure off. So hopefully that helps. Cool.
Thank you.
No worries.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, anything else? Sorry, before I jump in. Pavinda, did you want to say something?
I'm all good.
You're all
Thanks,
good?
That was a pretty good session. Yeah.
Cool. I agree. Thank you so much, Chris. I think Chris deserves a round of applause, and we don't get to do that on Zoom very much. So unmute yourselves, please, so we can hear it.
You're so good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been great. And I think I know I'm going to want to rewatch this recording to capture a lot of really great nuggets in there, get to writing, and maybe even practicing with someone else in the room. I can imagine that being quite helpful. And if not, you've got Emma and I to support you. This is going to be great, team. Really looking forward to the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, if you guys pair up and do presentations back and forth to each other on Zoom as a practice, that'll be huge with the timer to make a big difference.
Awesome. Cool. If we're happy to, Chris, is there anything else you want to leave the group with? We're good?
No, I'm good. If you do have any questions, let Ella know, and I'm sure she'll pass them on to me. I'll get back to you with any answers.
All right. We're going to finish the way we started with a bit of a jam. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Ella.
Yes.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for that jam.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks, Pravinda.